Hello again and welcome back. I'm Hiro. In this video we're going to be covering some kind of intermediate shots. The first one I want to go over is the crossed hands, back edge, offside head. So let's break that down. What does that mean? So crossed hands, back edge, offside head. So in the last video we talked about Zwerchhau, which is a back edge shot to the onside head. So this is the opposite, where you just back edge shot to the offside head. And so your arms will cross over. This is again one of the reasons why you don't want your hands too wide on the weapon, because it makes offside shots harder. This shot shows up a lot in German longsword manuals. I'm not 100% sure of the correct terminology, but I usually call it a reverse Zwerchhau, just to differentiate it from the onside version. So the normal Zwerchhau and then the reverse one. I'm going to switch hands real quick so you can see it easier. So from middle stance, I'm crossing my hands and rotating the weapon to hit with the back edge instead of the front edge. This shot gets used less often than its older brother because A, it's a little bit harder to execute, and B, you can potentially expose your back to your opponent. So if I'm fighting a left-handed opponent, their weapon is over here, then when I throw this shot, I've now exposed my back to my opponent, and so they can kill me easily. So to avoid that, you want to step around to the outside of their weapon. So if we're fighting like this, switch hands. So if we're fighting like this, and I throw a shot like this, then she can hit me in the back easily. All right, so in order to do this properly, I want to get around the opponent's weapon in order to hit them.
I could.
Yeah. So yeah, if I just do it straight on, then she can counterattack easily. So I want to get around my opponent's weapon in order to do that shot safely. Pivot steps. If you use a pivot step, I'll switch hands again, so I'm doing this left-handed. Pivot step also helps you get off the opponent's line. One thing about this shot is it's a lot easier with shorter weapons than with longer weapons. Most of the shots shown so far can be done just fine no matter what the length is. But with the reverse Zwerchhau, I find that longer weapons is more difficult. So if I'm here and I throw that shot, it just feels like my weapon has a really long way to travel. Next shot we're going to go over is a lever back edge offside head. So that basically looks like this. If my weapon's out here, then I'm going to lever up into their offside head. Times when you would use this shot is if I were to countercut, then I can just move immediately into that shot. Sometimes you will want to step into the block and then do that. Sometimes you will want to step away and then do it that way. And when you do it this way, it's more likely to hit them in the face instead of the side of the head, unless they've turned to face you as you move. One thing is you want to make sure you put a lot of pop in it. You don't want to use like a shoveling motion, because that's A, doesn't hit hard enough, and B, is more likely to skip off the top of their helmet. So next shot I want to go over is the driving thrust. So with the driving thrust, you step forward and extend your arms, but you're not powering the shot with your arms. You're powering the shot with your body movement. So if I'm here, step forward and power it with my body movement instead of my arms. When you extend your arms, push them a little to the side. So if I'm here in the middle, as I step forward, I want to twist my weapon so that I'm presenting my blade to the opponent, or presenting the edge of my blade, I should say, and then push it a little bit to the left, rather than pushing straight forward. And so the reason why you do that is when we are going over defense, I said that it only takes a few inches of movement to deflect a thrust. Here we're trying to prevent the opponent from deflecting your thrust. Fiona, could you assist me again? So if Fiona's here and I try to thrust, go ahead and push against my weapon. Yeah, then she can deflect it. But if I put more force into it, it's going to be harder for her to deflect my weapon. And so that's how the driving thrust works. So essentially, you're trying to push your weapon into their weapon as you thrust. And once again, you're driving the motion with your legs and not your arms. One thing about the driving thrust is because you're putting all of your weight behind it, it can hit pretty hard. So you want to keep relaxed hands so that if you hit too hard, the weapon will slide in your hands, and that minimizes the chance of injuring your opponent. All right, next shot I want to go over is actually two shots in one. I call it the very fast leg-head combo. The reason this one isn't grouped with the other combos is because it feels to me like more like a single move rather than two distinct shots. So essentially what it looks like is I throw a leg shot or hip shot and then immediately flip my weapon into a headshot. My top hand does move a little bit, but most of the motion is in my bottom hand. It's kind of like a rowing motion. My top hand is the oar lock, and the bottom hand I'm rowing with the bottom hand. So I'll do that slowly again. So leg to head, and it goes really, really quickly. I'm going to throw it full speed real quick. And so I really like that shot, especially against great weapon fighters. It's not quite as effective against sword and shield fighters for two reasons. Number one, the angle of the second shot is not particularly favorable compared to like a high angle shot. It's too easy for the opponent to catch that shot on their shield. Or a lot of sword and shield fighters, when they block a leg shot, they'll automatically move their sword to block headshots as well. So yeah, I really like the fast leg head combo against great weapon fighters, but it's not quite as good against sword and shield fighters. All right, last shot I'm going to talk about in this section is an offside body or hip. So offside body, that's belly or hip. Just like with the offside head, your bottom hand should come up underneath your top hand. So that's what it looks like. You can throw this from neutral, but I find it works better after a pop thrust or as a circular strike, which I'll talk about in just 1 minute. A few things to note about this shot is if your hands are too wide, again, anytime you're throwing an offside shot, if your hands are too wide, you'll need to slide your hands a little bit. I don't slide my hands very often, but this is one of the few shots where I do, because that extra inch or two of reach really helps. And then just slide my hand back as I recover. I've also been working on a back edge shot, a back edge version of this. And so what that looks like is I throw it, and instead of hitting at the front edge right like this, I turn my hands over at the last second to hit with the back edge. If you're going to practice that one, you need to practice a lot because it takes a while to get used to the body mechanics for that one. All right, next thing is circular strikes. Concept of the circular strike is pretty simple. I move my weapon to one side and then continue in one smooth motion around to attack the other side. So you're basically bringing your weapon in an arc or cone over your head. Circular strikes can be combined with a lot of the shots that we've already gone over in previous videos, well, in this video and previous videos, to create new shots and variations. The important thing to remember is to make it one continuous motion instead of two separate motions. So if I wanted to feint the offside and then move to an onside head, I'm not going to feint and then do that. I want it to be one continuous smooth motion. So what you want to do is when you're throwing circular strike is keep your hands in front of you to protect your head. So if I face the camera, it looks like that. One thing you don't want to do is a big over the head motion, because that's slower and leaves your face exposed to attack.
And you'll risk hitting yourself in the head.
If you feel like you have to do a really big over the head motion like that, then your weapon is probably too heavy. Try to, either make your weapon lighter or get a new weapon. Power generation is super easy because you've got all this circular movement to generate stick acceleration. Ways that you would use circular strikes. Number one is to feint. So if I were to feint to the offside and then to attack the onside. And again, I want to make sure that the feint and the strike are part of one continuous movement rather than two separate movements. Sometimes a double step, so I step this way and then immediately step the other way, will help sell the feint. So if I do step that way and immediately step to the other side, that helps sell the feint. Another way to help sell the feint is if you float your weapon towards the side you want to attack. So if I want to attack the onside, then I would float my weapon a little bit toward the onside, so that when I cross over to the offside, which, remember, the offside is the feint. So if I cross over to the offside, that helps sell the feint, because it makes it look like I've actually committed to that first shot when I haven't. I'm going to do that once against the camera first. All right, so from here, I feint to this side and then attack. And again, trying to make sure it's one smooth motion. Or if I were to feint to the onside and then attack the offside. Again, trying to make sure that it's nice and smooth. All right, so the next one is defensive slap. If we go back to the relaxed low stance, so it looks something like this. And if my opponent attacks me, then I want to use a defensive slap to slap their weapon away and then continue that movement to attack. Again, I'm trying to make it one smooth movement and not two separate movements. So if I were to do that against the Pel, the opponent attacks me, I slap it away, and then strike. This works best from the low guard. If you do it from middle or high guard, it's a lot harder to generate enough power in the slap to actually get the opponent's weapon out of your way. So if I were to throw it from middle guard, I just don't have enough stick acceleration to really slap their weapon away like I need to. Next one is exactly the opposite, offensive slap. So if my opponent has their weapon out in front of me, can you help me please? So if their opponent has their weapon out front, then I can slap it away and attack. And once again, I'm trying to make sure it's one smooth motion and not two separate motions. And just like with the defensive slap, the offensive slap works best from low guard because you have a lot more power. Another thing to keep in mind, go ahead and hold your weapon out again, is after the slap, if you kind of keep a little bit of contact with the opponent's weapon, that makes it harder for them to recover and hit you back before you can hit them. All right, the last one is using a circular strike from the bind. So from the bind basically means when our weapons are like this, if Fiona is pushing really hard, then I let her push my weapon and then continue into the attack. So go ahead and do that again. So if she's pushing here, I let her push my weapon so I can attack her. So against the Pel, basically it looks like I'm pretending that my opponent is pushing my weapon, I let them push my weapon, and then attack. So most of the time with that one, you're going to be pulling away to the right to attack the left, or if your hands are switched, you're going to be pulling away to the left to attack the right, just because that's the way your weapons are likely to cross. It's less likely that your weapons will be crossed the other direction. So now I want to go over what I call natural combos. And by natural combo, I mean that the shots flow naturally into each other without any weird body mechanics or weird return paths. So the first one is pop thrust to literally almost anything else. So if I throw a pop thrust in that split second decision point after my pop thrust hits, I can choose what shot I want to throw to. So pop thrust to onside leg, or pop thrust to offside body, pop thrust to onside head, pop thrust to offside head, pop thrust to Zwerchhau. That's one of my favorites. So yeah, basically putting a pop thrust before almost any other shot makes a really effective and simple combo. One thing to keep in mind is that you want your pop thrust to bounce upward. I mean, if it doesn't hit and kill the opponent, you want it to bounce upward, because that's going to set you up for your next shot better than if it bounces a different direction. If it bounces down, then you might not be able to follow into the next shot very easily, but in my experience, it's very unlikely that it'll bounce down. If your pop thrust bounces to one side or the other instead of straight up, then you want to put your follow-up attack on whichever side it bounced to. Next is if I throw a Zwerchhau to offside head, or depending on where the opponent is, this might actually hit them in the face. And it's reverse if I throw an offside head into a Zwerchhau. So those two are interchangeable. In HEMA circles, this is sometimes called a Zwerchcopter or helicopter of death. You can also do a reverse Zwerchhau. I'm going to switch hands so it's easier to see. So I'm left-handed now. A reverse Zwerchhau into onside head, or the opposite, onside head into reverse Zwerchhau. That one is used a little bit less often, just because the reverse Zwerchhau is not as good as its older brother. Last one I want to discuss is throwing an offside body or hip into an onside head. Almost any version of the onside head will work. So if I do offside body into normal onside head, offside body into Zwerchhau. I think my favorite is offside body into high angle onside head or flat snap, just because when you throw that, your hands do kind of this cool corkscrew motion. So I'm going to face the camera. So offside body into onside head. Your hands kind of do this cool corkscrew motion going up and down, and I think that's neat. Alright, last thing I want to talk about on this video is block and counter. So what shots do you throw after a block? I use an A-frame block most of the time. So if I throw an A-frame block, what can I do after that? So from A-frame block this direction, I can throw offside head, offside body, even do an offside leg, but you kind of have to reach for that one. If I do an A-frame block toward this direction, so A-frame block here, then that sets me up for an onside head, including a high angle onside head or flat snap. So you can also do to offside or onside hip or leg. You can also do A-frame block to driving thrust. So if my opponent throws toward this side of my body, I block and then immediately step forward with the driving thrust. Power generation after an A-frame block is super easy, because if you turn your hips into the attack, because you want to turn your hips into the attack because that gives you better structure. Makes it so the opponent is less likely to blow through your block and still hit you. So you want to turn your hips into the attack, and so power generation is easy because now my hips are primed for that counterattack. So if I block to this side, and again, my hips are primed for that counterattack. Next one, I already went over it a little bit, but I'm going to reiterate it. So that's a counter cut to the lever back edge head. So as Fiona attacks my leg, I counter cut down into it, and I want to maintain control of her weapon. So maintain contact as I, bring up to hit her. And if that doesn't kill her for whatever reason, I want to try to cut back down onto her weapon. So that I maintain control of her weapon while I decide my next move. So next one is hand switch block to offside head. So again, a hand switch block, which we went over in the previous video, I'm basically moving my bottom hand from down here to up here to protect my leg better. And then from here, this is a very close range move. So from here, I just twist back the other direction to hit them at super close range.
Oh, hi.
Oh, hi. And so after that shot, I usually want to move immediately back into my block as I try to get out of there, so that if this shot doesn't kill them for whatever reason, I don't want to stay here at close range. I want to get out.
Bye.
Last one is, we already went over this in the circular strike section, but basically defensive slap in the circular strike. Most likely it's going to be a shot coming here towards my onside. I want to slap that away and then attack the opponent's onside. Either head or leg or whatever shots are available to me. Okay. All right, so I think that's good enough for this video. I hope to catch you on the next one.